Hey everyone, and welcome. I am super excited to be your guide for today's explainer, where we're going to explore the incredibly fascinating microscopic world of tissues. If you've ever stopped to wonder exactly how living things manage to be so insanely complex and efficient, well, you are in the right place. We're going to break down NCERT Class 9 Science, Chapter 6 together, step by step.
Okay, let's dive right in. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll kick things off by defining what tissues actually are, then we'll look at plant tissues, followed by animal tissues, and finally wrap the whole thing up with a summary of our biggest takeaways.
All right, starting with Section 1, what exactly are tissues?
To really appreciate what tissues do, we need to think about how living things actually operate. Think about this for a second. How does a single-celled amoeba differ from, say, a human being? In a unicellular organism like that amoeba, that one single cell is doing literally all the heavy lifting. It's handling movement, eating, breathing, and excretion. It's basically a biological one-man band. But in multicellular organisms, like us or the giant trees outside, there are millions, actually billions of cells. If every single one of those cells tried to do everything all at once, it would be absolute chaos, completely inefficient. So what we need is a biological division of labor.
To solve that massive efficiency problem, cells that specialize in one specific function group together. So a tissue is basically just a group of cells that are similar in structure and team up to pull off a particular job. By delegating specific tasks to specialized clusters, like, muscle cells contracting so you can move, or nerve cells zipping messages around, multicellular organisms become these highly tuned, super efficient machines. Moving right along to Section 2, Plant Tissues, the Builders.
Let's see how this whole concept plays out in the stationary, heavily reinforced world of plants. So, unlike animals, plants only grow in very specific regions, and this growth is driven by actively dividing cells called meristematic tissue. A quick trick to remember the three types? Just think AIL, reading from top to bottom. First, A for apical meristem. That's found right at the growing tips of stems and roots, increasing the plant's length. Next is I for intercalari meristem, located at the nodes, or the base of the leaves, which helps the branches grow. And finally, L for lateral meristem, found on the sides, which actually increases the horizontal girth, or the thickness of the stem. AIL. Easy, right?
But hey, what happens when those actively dividing meristematic cells get older? Well, they lose the ability to divide and they take on a permanent role. We call this process differentiation. Once differentiated, they become one of three simple permanent tissues, and the structural upgrades here are pretty amazing. We start with parenchyma. These are living cells with thin walls and large spaces between them, basically acting as a packing tissue that stores food. Next up is Collenchyma. Still living, but now with pectin thickening up the corners. This decreases the space but adds crucial flexibility, meaning stems can bend in a strong wind without just snapping in half. And finally, we reach Sclerenchyma. These cells are actually dead. They have extremely thick, lignified walls and absolutely zero intercellular space. They provide ultimate hardness and stiffness. Just think of the ultra-hard husk of a coconut.
Now those were simple tissues, made of just one cell type. Complex permanent tissues, on the other hand, are made of a mix of different cell types all working together as a single unit, essentially forming the plant's plumbing system. We have the xylem, which is made up of tracheids, vessels, xylem parenchyma, and xylem fibers. And then we have its partner, the phloem, made of sieve tubes, companion cells, phloem parenchyma, and phloem fibers.
The absolute core difference between these two vital pipelines? It's all about what they carry and which way they're going. The xylem is a strict one-way street. It conducts water and dissolved minerals upwards, directly from the roots to the rest of the plant. The phloem, though, is a two-way street. It handles the translocation of food, mostly the sugars cooked up during photosynthesis, moving it from the leaves to wherever it's needed, whether that's up to the growing tips or all the way down to the roots.
Before we leave the plant world, we have to talk about defense. The entire outer surface of a plant is wrapped in a protective tissue called the epidermis. It's usually a single continuous layer of cells with no spaces. It's got these tiny pores called stomata, which are controlled by guard cells, allowing for gas exchange. In really dry environments, this epidermis secretes a thick, waxy, water-resistant coating called cutin to lock in moisture. But as the plant ages, a secondary meristem comes in and replaces that outer layer with cork. Cork cells are dead, tightly packed together, and contain a chemical called suberin. That suberin makes the bark totally impervious to both gases and water.
Let's just take a quick breather and lock this in. Plant tissues fall into four broad buckets. Meristematic for continuous active growth, simple permanent for structure,
giving everything from flexibility to absolute rigidity. Complex permanent, for transporting all that water and food, and protective tissues, acting as the ultimate outer shield.
I absolutely love this thought. Plants stand tall and stay put. Their tissues are the ultimate builders and defenders. Because plants literally can't run away from danger or walk to a water source, their absolute top priority is structural support and defense. That is exactly why they can afford to have so many thick, rigid, dead cells. But this sets us up for a completely different evolutionary strategy.
Section 3. Animal tissues, the movers.
So animals are the movers. We roam around searching for food, for mates, for shelter. And that active lifestyle means we burn through vastly more energy than plants do. Because of that, our tissues are fundamentally different. They are mostly living, highly specialized, and super energy intensive. A perfect example of this is how animal bodies protect themselves. Epithelial tissues form the continuous outer layers of our skin and the inner linings of our organs. Notice how tightly packed they are? They rest on a basement membrane with almost zero intracellular space. And their shapes are like a custom-fit suit for their specific jobs. The ultra-thin squamous epithelium is perfect for quick gaseous exchange in the lungs. Stack those up, and it becomes stratified squamous, perfect for protecting your skin from daily wear and tear. Cuboidal cells give mechanical support in kidney tubules. And those tall columnar cells, they line the intestines for maximum absorption. Some of them even have tiny little hairs called cilia that physically sweep mucus forward in our respiratory tract. It's wild.
Next up, we've got connective tissue, which, well, does exactly what the name suggests. It connects, supports, and transports. Unlike those tightly packed epithelial cells we just talked about, connective tissues usually have their cells floating or suspended in an extracellular matrix. Blood is the classic example here. You've got fluid plasma carrying dissolved salts and proteins, and suspended in that you've got oxygen-carrying red blood cells, germ-fighting white blood cells, and platelets for clotting. But blood is just the start. This category is wonderfully diverse. It includes the rigid bone and flexible cartilage that make up our skeleton, the ligaments and tendons tying our joints and muscles together, and even areolar and adipose tissues, which basically act as biological bubble wrap and insulating fat stores around our organs.
Now, you can't be a mover without muscles, right? Here we can compare the three main types of muscular tissue side by side. First, we have cardiac muscle, which is found only in the heart. These cells are cylindrical, branched, and they pump tirelessly, day and night, completely involuntarily. Then there's skeletal muscle, which is attached directly to our bones. These are long, striated or striped fibers that we control voluntarily, like when you decide to walk across the room or lift something heavy. Finally, we have smooth muscle, which doesn't have those stripes. This is found in organs like our stomach and blood vessels, gently and involuntarily pushing food and fluids through our bodies without us even having to think about it.
But here's the thing. None of that incredible movement means anything without a command and control center. Enter nervous tissue, specifically the single nerve cell known as a neuron. You can really just think of this as biological wiring. At one end is the cell body, or cyton, with these branch-like receptors called dendrites. They pick up incoming signals. That signal then shoots down this long, cable-like structure called the axon, all the way to the nerve ending, where it gets passed along to the next cell. This lightning-fast transmission of messages is exactly what lets us react to our environment in a split second.
Which brings us to Section 4, Summary and Key Takeaways.
Wow, okay, we've covered a massive amount of ground today, zooming all the way from individual, microscopic cells to whole functioning organ systems. The biggest takeaway from this journey into the biological division of labor is simply this: lifestyle dictates biology. The differences in these tissues showcase completely different evolutionary solutions to survival. Plant tissues are built for a stationary life. They offer immense structural support, they need much less energy, and they can heavily rely on rigid, dead cells. Animal tissues, however, are built for active locomotion. They form highly specialized organ systems that demand tons of energy, and they are made up almost entirely of living, breathing, working cells. I want to leave you all with one final thought to ponder. We've seen just how incredibly specialized each tissue is, right? From the water-carrying xylem in a giant redwood to the tirelessly beating cardiac muscle in your own chest. If just one of those specialized tissue types were to fail, how does that domino effect impact the entire organism's survival? It really puts into perspective the fragile, intricate, and honestly beautiful interconnectedness of life's division of labor. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking questions, keep wondering, and I'll catch you next time.